Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum, dear friends. Welcome to another Tuesday night session tonight with Sharik. Sharik is a scientist and he has a vast amount of knowledge of all different types of aspects of science. We already did a program on geology and various other parts. Today we are very excited to hear all about biology and particularly creation and other matters. So Sharik, without further ado, please start your talk. Bismillah, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sister Kristiane. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So I've posted the links to the previous two sessions into the chat line. They were on astronomy and geology. I haven't made them public. They can all be viewed by those who have this shareable link. They're not on my channel public, just so you know that. I think that was important because there can be issues with making it public. So it's just a shareable link. And this time I'm glad to say that it is the area of my expertise because it's biology. And maybe I should mention just briefly that I do have a background in biology. So my title is MSc. It's strictly speaking, by British standards, it would be a PhD because I did 4 years of studies and 3 years of thesis, which was published during a neurobiological conference in Germany, Göttingen, the Neurobiologentagung, which is the main neurobiologist conference in Germany.
Amazing.
And so the status, if you translated my studies and my degree 1-to-1, it would be a PhD. But I have never bothered to have my degree naturalized in the UK because I really didn't need my degree for my professional career. But I thought it was worth mentioning because there was a video posted the other day by someone who in the chat, our WhatsApp group is called H, and correct me, I don't know who H is. Is he or she a sister or a brother? And what is their name? They posted a link to Hamza Yusuf's video who was talking about briefly about creation and evolution. And, you know, biologists, I correctly agree with Sheikh Hamza Yusuf that biologists really should stay out of other aspects of science and talk about their expertise. But, you know, they end up talking about cosmology and about geology quite a lot, as I did, admittedly, because basically it's part of the holistic scientific study, so to say, right? We do learn chemistry, physics, even botany, if we want to specialize in neurology and zoology. We learn all that also up to the BSc level in Germany, actually, and then we take it further to the MSc and PhD. But we have covered astronomy and geology in previous sessions, and I've sent the links to those sessions. They are, if you wish to, they're quite in depth actually, and this one, inshallah, will also be quite in depth, but I will not go deep into each and every area. I will just touch upon it. And if there are any questions, I would be grateful if you could keep them for the end so as to not to interrupt the flow, because there's quite a lot to cover. So the purpose of my presentation is to outline verses from the Quran that describe natural phenomena as scientific theories are, or the consensus of science is describing currently. So they're the dominating narrative of science today. And we try to conclude similarities between science and the verses. And they make a very compelling case because you could say there's coincidence and you could say science changes, but I understand the Muslims who say, or some Shaykh who say that we should not base our iman on science, and I agree with that. But the main reason they state is that scientists themselves are flawed. Obviously, I agree with that. We are humans and we are imperfect. But you know, to me, the multitude of verses that match with the current scientific paradigm are just overwhelming. And they make such a compelling case. And at the very least, we can use them to increase our yaqeen once we have obtained the level of iman, whereby Allah has given us clear signs. And we had also, we've also used these verses quite successfully to introduce scientific learning into the madrasas, to structure scientific learning for Muslims as Muslim children as part of their curriculum. So that's a very useful tool for that, to encourage people to learn science, but also to increase their yaqeen in light. And obviously, last but not least, in the creationist, evolutionist debate, which I specialize in, and also the debates with neo-Darwinists and with atheists. So that's basically what we're going to cover, part of what we're going to cover, because today's topic is biology. I want to refer to a few of my mentors, and they are Professor Zulul Al-Najjar. I would say he's the leading specialist on Islam and science. He's a geologist who was a professor here, or who graduated at the University of Wales, and he taught as a professor at the King Faisal University in Saudi Arabia, and he's Egyptian by origin. Obviously,
Would you mention his name again?
Zulul Al-Najjar. N-A-J-J-A-R. Most of the verses that he discovered, I referred to in the geology session last time, during the geology session. But Maurice Buchal and Keith Elmore were leading when it comes to embryology in the Quran. And obviously other scholars, even Zakir Naik has referred to the scientific science quite extensively. So I think that is.
Give us these the scholars' names in the chat or on WhatsApp, on the WhatsApp.
Yes, I will send links to their Perfect. Works. But Zulul Al-Najjar is the main one who I think who's been present in the media recently as well. I'm delighted to still be in touch with him on Facebook Messenger, and I see him as my mentor, and he's very well established in the Arab-speaking world. So without further ado, I'd like to dive straight in. Some of the generic verses I'd like to refer to in my sessions are always the introductory verses of the Surah Al-Baqarah, where we get the statement from Allah that this book is really for those who have also the yaqeen of the hereafter. So I think it is a duty to obtain yaqeen, and for that there are diverse tools available to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions that he will show us his signs in the distant regions, as well as anfusikum in the nafs, in our own selves, in our souls. It's translated very often. So, that to me is the narrative. It's the astronomy, and then via geology all the way to the biology of human beings. This is also how scientists see the evolution happen. The physical evolution of atoms, the chemical evolution of molecules, and then the biological evolution of living organisms, right? So just a quick summary on the topics that we've covered during the previous sessions. I've sent links to the sessions in the chat line. I wanted to add that the elements, there's a lot of detail on the numerology of the Quran when it comes to the elements. I would encourage everyone to study that separately from this session, because it's quite in depth, and the number 19 plays a big role in the Quranic numerology, and even the distance from the, that's in geology, the distance from the surface of the earth to its core is encoded, as well as, the number of the surah in the Quran, 114, which are the stable elements, and the, in the numerology of the Quran, the deeper we dive, and part of it I will mention today as well, the more we are discovering, and it's really endless, subhanAllah. Even the speed of light is encoded in the Quran, right? And that is, I think, clear proof, mathematical proof, direct proof of the authenticity, of the correctness of the Quran, and that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's word. So the Earth's interior is also encoded, as I said, and this is a summary of the topics we covered during the geology session. As I said, and there are links in the chat line, and I will start where we ended last time, which was with the first forms of life. I had quoted this hadith towards the end of my geology session, which very beautifully outlines the chronology of creation by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And it seems a few things in this hadith seem a bit odd, because Allah mentions that he created light after the trees, okay? Now, light after trees, how can that be understood? Because how can plants be alive without light? We all know from biology that plants conduct photosynthesis and they need light for that process. Now, that tree as such is a very generic term, and in Arabic you might refer to Shajar al-Khaluq. Al-Khulud is the tree of creation, the origin of the created life forms, and Prophet ﷺ also mentions the al-makruh, the loathsome things, all right? And they could be interpreted as the mitochondria or the extremophile bacteria that are now part of our cell, which are the mitochondria. So we know now, in fact, that the first life forms existed before light on the planet, because when volcanoes were erupting and the atmosphere was dusty, no light could penetrate the surface of the earth in the early periods of planet Earth. Later on then, light penetrated the surface, and submarines dived to the bottoms of the oceans and discovered that in the black smokers, which are where the continental shelves meet, there are black smokers. There's smoke escaping from the Earth's interior, rich in minerals and in sulfuric gases. And there are extremophile bacteria there that actually nurture a whole biosystem. And these extremophile bacteria, sorry, I will skip a few, are at the continental plates, where you can see the red line, where the continental plates meet. And this hadith clearly refers, and we'll come back to that later on, with the clay and with the creation of Adam Friday afternoon, but clay being the first. But these minerals from the Earth's interior are nurturing a whole ecosystem. And down there in the guts of these pipeworm, there are extremophile bacteria that are using sulfur to create energy, just like surface plants use sunlight and carbon dioxide to convert into oxygen and give us air to breathe. Just like that, the bacteria down there in the guts of the pipeworms are creating energy for these pipeworms and for a whole ecosystem, as you can see here, from sulfur gases. So they are totally independent from the surface of the earth, totally independent from the light of the sun, all right? So life, and biologists now know that these, when they've dated the DNA and the genealogy of these life forms, that these are the oldest life forms that were there before the life on the surface of the earth existed, all right? So the extremophile bacteria at the bottom of the ocean, so-called archaeobacteria, all right? And they, today on the surface of the earth, we find them in, volcanic vents, we find them in extreme lakes, sulfuric lakes, etc., in hot springs where other forms of life can't exist. So very likely these are the origins of all life as we know today, apart from, and that's what where we differ from evolutionary biologists, apart from human beings. This is just a picture, and there's a theory in biology called, there's a picture of an extremophile bacteria, and about the dominating theory in biology today, the endosymbiosis theory, says that these bacteria were ingested by early forms of cells and took over the job of generating the energy for that cell. So they became the mitochondria, they became the chloroplast in the plants, they became the mitochondria in the animals later on. So that's the endosymbiosis theory. Extremophile bacteria ingested by cells became the basis of our breathing apparatus, the mitochondria. We only inherit those from our mothers, by the way, the mitochondria. This is what the mitochondria look like, essentially, okay? And they have the ability to convert oxygen and sugar into energy in form of ATP. ATP, which our muscles can use to move to, and our nerves can use to transmit signals as well. And I will keep coming back to this hadith because very beautifully outlines the chronology of creation. And you can see how beautifully Prophet ﷺ mentions how Adam, peace be upon him, was created in the latest hours of Friday afternoon, Friday being the last day of the week in the Arabic understanding. Okay, then let's go further into the actual verses that I want to refer to in this biology session. Now, Allah commands us to travel through the earth, and for many reasons in the Quran, but one of the reasons he mentions specifically here is to see how Allah originated creation. All right. In the Surah Mulk, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions how he wants us to monitor the skies and how he wants us to monitor his creation until our vision retires, until we become tired of monitoring his creation. And here he commands us clearly to travel through the earth and see how he brought forth creation. All right. So there's no way around it. It is an article. It is actually a command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to study science in that sense. All right. And he furthermore states that if all of men met together and tried to create some life, they would not even be able to create one fly. And if the fly snatched something away from them, like for example, a mosquito sucks your blood, you are not able to retrieve that drop of blood from the mosquito, right? So this is how powerless we are in the face of creation. Now, when scientists say that they have actually created something, a new life form, using genetic engineering, what are they using? They're using DNA, and DNA are the building blocks of life. Where did they get their DNA from? Mostly they get it from other organisms, right? So they're not using, as Sheikh Hamza Yusuf clearly stated in that one video, which I referred to, he told a joke and he said, an atheist met God, God forbid, and he said, well, we don't need you anymore. And God answers, well, why is that? And he said, well, we've managed to create life. And God says, I wonder how you managed to create life. How did you begin? He said, well, first we took some cosmic dust. God interrupts him and says, wait a moment, bring your own cosmic dust, right? And that's essentially the point of this ayah, because no matter what scientists are using to create life, new forms of life, they're using building blocks that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided, whether it's DNA, molecules, atoms, subatomic particles, cosmic dust, whatever they use, that creation has the capacity to bring forth life. And this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation, the basic building blocks of life. In fact, there was an experiment done in the 1950s by someone called Miller with another scientist called Urey, who experimented with different substances and tried to recreate the conditions of origin of the original atmosphere of the earth and the primordial lakes.
Sorry, I'm muting everybody. So sorry. Oh, hang on, I muted him. Oh shit. Sharif.
Okay, yes, sorry, yes.
Sorry.
No problem. No problem. Somebody was talking.
Could you just come back and could you also show that table of evolution again, just for us to actually have a look at it properly? It was a bit fast.
Yes, I will show it later on if you don't mind. I will bring it back. I will come back to the chronology of creation later on, because I want to emphasize that I do not support the evolution of human beings from animals. Okay, I don't want I want this clearly not to be misunderstood. I do not support the theory of evolution that we came from animals or apes, and the Quran makes it clear, and I will come to that if we are patient a little bit. I will come to that point. All right. Good. And it's a very interesting point. All right.
Yeah.
Because actually there is a verse which hasn't been published before as a scientific sign of the Quran, which I have referred to myself as the first person to do it. All right. And it's been undiscovered, let's say, so far in that sense. But back to this, the way scientists try to prove that, life can create itself from nothing by using primordial elements and trying to recreate the conditions that existed in primordial lakes in the early earth, on the early earth. And apparently they got some amino acids, some building blocks, basic building blocks. But again, it has to be said that what they used as a basis was already there before, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about himself that he is also a creator and an evolver. So he is not only a khaliq, but also al-bariyu. And this has been translated as the evolver, and someone who changes something after it exists. So essentially, this is one of his names, as one of his attributes, okay? In Surah Yunus, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also mentions that he is the one who originated creation, and he can repeat it multiple times, okay? So it's a repetitive process. He can originate it and he can repeat it. And if we look at the evolution of animals, emphasis of animals, not of humans, but the evolution of animals, we see in the geological record that there have been mass extinctions in the past, all right? And very often there were mass extinctions to such an extent that hardly any organisms were left over. And then from those very few organisms, new types of organisms arose. And that happened apparently multiple times throughout Earth's history. You know, in over the last billion years. That eventually then led to vertebrate organisms and land-living animals. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he created every animal from water, and we know the famous verse about the Big Bang, which also mentions creation from water, and Allah mentions the multitude of creations available on planet Earth. He also mentions that he raised us from other people. Now, whatever that means, that is not clear cut, but Allah mentions that he raised us from other people, other types of people. So what does that refer to? I'll just leave that thought there. Very interestingly, this is the verse I was referring to, one of the verses that I would like to refer to when it comes to the case of human beings having evolved from animals, which is wrong. And I will come back to that later on. But here you can see that in fact, multiple times, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that he changed human beings into apes rather than the other way around. And this he mentions multiple times, right? And it's not only apes, he even includes swine, pigs in that statement, scattered throughout the Quran multiple times. He mentions that those whom he punished for breaking the Sabbath or who transgressed beyond all bounds, he changed them to become apes, despised and rejected, and apes and swine. Okay, hold that thought. Interestingly enough, there's a theory in human biology, a very recent one, after studying the spinal cord of many hominins, which are, you know, the fossils found of human-like creatures from the last billion years, from the last million years, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 million years, in different strata, in different caves. They've studied the spinal cord and they've established that that spinal cord shows hints of a structure that could actually, that is reminiscent of tree life and of apes. So all this ancestral tree that scientists are painting, which is, you know, the Australopithecines who were partly upright walking, then leading to different hominoid creatures, such as Homo erectus here, for example, who is apparently the ancestor of all living beings today. These Australopithecines show hints of tree life, and also other hominins here who have further evolved are showing spinal structure which is reminiscent of tree life, right? So what I'm questioning here is the vector or the direction of evolution. Is it always clear-cut just from these life forms to there, or is it from there to back here partly as well, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this ayah? So there's a professor in the Senckenberg Institute in Frankfurt, Germany, where I studied, Professor Goodman, who said that the vector of evolution is not clear cut because the strata vary. You cannot clearly say that these higher organisms have evolved from these lower organisms. Sometimes there's degeneration or devolution taking place as well. Just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, he changed, humans back to apes, all right? Or how did apes come about? That's the other question. And when it comes to pigs, today, scientists are very close to, and I think they have succeeded in replacing human organs with those of pigs. In fact, the heart, for example, can be transplanted from a pig into a human being. So the inner organs, the organal structure, also the omnivorous lifestyle, and many, many other things like the hormones are very similar between pigs and humans. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he changed some of humans back into apes and swine, that clearly reflects the fact that animals and that pigs and apes are very, organically speaking, very close to us. But what are the exact differences between animals and humans? All right, there are clear-cut differences as well, and I would like to emphasize those before we mistake anything here. So it's the degree of cerebration, our neocortex, our cerebral capacity, which is the volume of our brain compared to the weight of our body. So it's the biggest brain compared to the weight of the body, with the exception of some dolphins or whales. But with dolphin and whales, you see that the density of nerves isn't that big. Their brain structure is different and consists of a lot of glia cells, a lot of cells that are in between the nerve cells, okay? But I mean, having said that, dolphins and whales are remarkable creatures, and it is possible to do a whole session just on them. Also, the energy consumed by our nerves, by our brains versus the muscles. So 1/3 of our energy is consumed by our brain, while the brain only makes between 1/50 to 1/100 of our weight, right? Just imagine how much energy is consumed by our brain versus our muscles. And that leads to the fact that we can control our muscles much better than animals can, okay? We have much better fine motorical skills, opposable thumbs, limb, so we have much better feeling, and we can move much more, we can move much finer with our limbs. And animals, like an animal of a similar stature, like an ape, for example, is much stronger than us because most of its energy is consumed by its muscles and not by its nerves, like us, okay? Also, there are other differences, like, for example, our sweat glands. We sweat through water. I don't think any animal sweats water. When they say sweat like a pig, that's not actually what they mean. It's oil, the oil glands that animals have. They have lipids, and they can't cool their body in the same way as we can. That leads to our ability to hunt over long periods and to stalk animals. And in fact, it's an ability which enables us to cool down as well when other animals can't. All right. Also, obviously, the chemistry and the hormones that lead to our ability to focus, our sensory organs are much, much more tuned to our tasks. Also, we possess true bipedalism. We can walk with our limbs free. I mean, when there are other upright walking animals, even apes and monkeys can walk upright to a certain extent, but animals such as ostriches, for example, they can walk upright, but they don't have limbs available to shape their environment, or other animals who walk upright. All birds essentially walk upright, but they don't have their wings to shape their environment. There are other sentinel beings, and as I said, that would be an interesting session to have us. Now, when it comes to these closely related animals, it's interesting or organically closely related, like apes and swine. They're also omnivores like us. But it's interesting to note that these are part of the forbidden food. Then also the other food that is forbidden. Now, if we look at the meat of pigs, obviously, as I said, they're omnivorous animals. Their meat is high in toxins. They have a strong concentration of parasites, more than other animals. And yes, it's to do with their environment. I mean, essentially, their role in the ecosystem is to dig the soil and rid it of its toxins. And that those toxins accumulate in their bodies. And then they take those toxins into the grave with them. So they clear the earth of the many toxins, like, heavy metals, for example. Also, if you look at the hormonal structure of pigs, very closely related to humans, so that the consumption leads to stress, leads to bad skin through the high concentration of urea. It leads to higher cholesterol than other meat, and its decay is very short comparatively to shelf life is very short. It causes, in my opinion, and I think there are many scientists who agree, that it causes more cancer than other types of meat. It has a high carbon footprint as such because of the way it's processed and stored, and the suffering of the animal, which is a sentient being, which has a very high level of consciousness. So this is something to think about when we talk about pig meat, if we ever confront that argument, for example. Now, an interesting fact is also that Prophet ﷺ mentioned that predatory animals are also not part of the halal diet, or birds with fangs, or any birds with talons. So the raptors, or the crows, etc. But predatory animals in general. So the higher up the food chain you go, right? Interesting fact that mercury and PCBs are higher concentrated in predatory animals, even in the marine food chain. So, for example, yes, all marine animals are essentially halal, but if you look at those who are apex predators, they have high concentrations of toxins, like big-eye tuna, like marlin, like king mackerel, and also PCBs. So the toxins of the environment and the ecosystem and fertilizers flow into the oceans, and then the higher up the food chain they work, the more concentrated they get. So it's a high concentration of toxins in the meat of predatory animals, as scientists have concluded. I would also like to mention that when Prophet ﷺ was asked about, fasting, that the Sahaba al-Ikram wanted to fast more than just during Ramadan, he mentioned that they could fast at the middle of the month, and then when they pressed it further, he said that, well, I fast Mondays and Thursdays. Monday, the day of creation, and Thursday, that was his birthday. But they kept pressing him, and then he mentioned that the best of fasts was that of David, peace be upon him, and he fasted every other day. Science has recently discovered that intermittent fasting every second day leads to better results than consecutive fasting every day. Okay, so that is also just a very interesting connection to make. So the scientific, it's whatever Prophet ﷺ said and whatever is in the Quran is scientifically sound. Okay, so how did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala originate our creation? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions two different substances, at-tin and salsaleh, which is, both translated as clay. But you could argue that they are different. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Surah Ar-Rahman, salsaleh al-fakhar, which is a sounding clay, which is, the finest of clays. And it's mentioned multiple times, but the differentiation is there between al-tin and al-salsal. So it's different types of clay. We can ponder on what that could be referring to. I will come back to it. Now, regarding clay, it's very interesting that there are current findings on the importance of clay when it comes to the chemical evolution and origins of life, specifically the polymerization of carbon atoms. So polycarbonates, which are long-chained, molecules consisting of carbon, and we are a carbon-based life form. Animals are carbon-based life forms. So clay plays a role in protecting those short chain or polychain molecules from ultraviolet radiation from falling apart, and catalyzes the polymerization of organic molecules. Clay minerals are essential to germination processes, clay minerals in the soil. And in the hadith, Prophet ﷺ mentioned that clay was the first creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the earth. So it is very interesting that it is key, clay is key to the origins of organic life, of carbon-based life. Okay, I think we could dive much deeper into these topics, but I just want to touch them and place the seeds of thought into your minds that will then hopefully trigger the curiosity to study further, because there's much more to say about these topics. But I'm aware of the time. I don't want to take much more than an hour for the presentation. So that's why I will move swiftly on to the next topic, which talks about the Ark of Nuh alayhi salam, which rested on Mount Judi, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. And it's interesting to mention that the Bible mentions Mount Ararat. So there's a difference between Quran and Bible. And this article, when it came out, I think around the millennium, caught my eye because it mentions clearly that they have found some remnants of a huge vessel, ancient vessel, in the vicinity of Mount Judi, and not Mount Ararat, which are, the mountains are not so far from each other, okay? And they even, and this article was in the Observer, they even quoted the Quranic verse. I was very astonished by the fact that a fossilized mountaintop has been found, which is reminiscent of the exact dimensions of the Quran as mentioned, of the Ark, as mentioned in the Bible. So this is interesting that this whole mountaintop essentially is fossilized into the Ark form. And it was, discovered at the time, but the whole area has been sealed off, and it's a military high security area in Turkey. So would be interesting whether, this can be explored or not. I haven't been able to make it there, but Turkey would be an interesting country to visit, not only for that, but also for an ancient monument called Göbekli Tepe, which is one of the oldest stone structures known, along with Adam's calendar in South Africa. So this is just some food for thought. Interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that he brought us forth from the tribe of Noah, that he saved us from the flood in the ark. That we essentially, these ayat which mention our origins dating back to the ark, mention that we originate from the people on the ark. So essentially, this is called a bottleneck in evolution, and all of the rest of mankind must have gone extinct during that flood, right? What does science say? Now, Chris Stringer is an interesting person. He changes his paradigm every couple of years, but I've debated with him a few times when I met him face to face, and I actually presented to him the theory that, apes, instead of us coming from apes, God forbid, apes might be descending from us. And he said actually that is an interesting thought. Chris Stringer also is a proponent of an opponent of the multi-regional theory. So he supports the out of Africa Eve hypothesis, and it's also called the Noah's Ark hypothesis now. The fact that we descend from a very small group of people, which can be proven from the mitochondrial DNA. I mentioned earlier on that the mitochondrial DNA, we only inherit that from our mother. So it's the maternal line. So a very small group of females, maybe even just 2 or 3 females, and a very small group of men as well. So the paternal lineage, which is Y chromosomal, also indicates that we descend from a very small group of people, okay? So science supports that. And you can read more into that if you're interested. But, anthropology and human evolution is an endless topic. And that would be something, to think about for a separate day. But I just want to mention it here. All right. Embryology. This was one of the first scientific science that I read about when in the late 90s, when I read about this the first time. The fact in Maurice Buchal's book, The Bible, Science and Quran, he referred to this, and later on I read booklets with verses from Keith and Moore, who was a leading embryologist. And actually Keith and Moore's embryology was a course book even when I was studying biology in the early 90s and the late 80s back in Germany. So Keith and Moore was the leading embryologist, and he referred to these ayat when it comes to the chronology of insemination, which is mentioned here. And when it comes to the chronology of embryological development, so the nutfa, alaqah, which is also in the Surah Alaq, and al-mudghah. Okay, so these three words are characteristics for, the essentially the sperm that reaches the egg and fertilizes it, or the ovum, and then the congealed blood, or the alaq, and then the fetus lump, which is translated as fetus lump, but it actually is a leech-like clot. And then the chronology of how the bones come into being, that the bones grow as a soft cartilage, and then they are then clothed with flesh, with the muscles. Interestingly enough, at the end of this beautiful ayah, Allah mentions that he developed out of that another creature. And this other creature is the key. All right. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invokes into this body another creature. And we know from our hadith that the soul reaches the body on the 40th day after insemination. All right. So this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states clearly that we are a separate creation, because if we look at the phylogeny versus phylogenesis versus embryogenesis, which was a dominant theory in biology for many centuries, you can see that also when you do comparative embryology, how embryology works in humans and how it works in animals, that for a very long time the stages are very similar between vertebrate animals, especially with mammals. Okay, so there's hardly any difference between mammalian embryos until the very end. And that is, in my opinion, that is amalgamated in this ayat here. He develops out of it another creature. Okay, and that's why we are separate creatures from animals, and that's why apes do not evolve from us. We don't evolve from apes. Rather, we are a separate creation, and apes evolve from us, as Allah says in the Quran. Okay, and that's nothing shocking, because that's nothing revolutionary, because Allah says it in the Quran. Okay, it's clear cut, and I've shown those verses. Okay, Allah mentions, of course.
You go back to those verses again, because it was a little bit fast. Just show those, if you don't mind.
These embryological ones, or the ones where Allah mentions that apes descend from us?
Yeah, both.
So these are the embryological verses, which are here, Surah Al-Mu'minun. And then the ape one, the one where the apes descend from humans, are multiple, but Allah mentions it in multiple places as well.
You mean the ones where he says, when you break all bounds, we turn you into swine or into apes or something?
Well, it's past tense. It doesn't happen now.
Yeah. Okay.
It's happened in the past.
Yeah. Okay.
A few times. And these are not the only verses, mentioned in more verses. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
So whenever someone says, well, we descend from apes, make him questioning whether it couldn't be the other way around.
Yeah, good point.
Right? If there's indications that we are so closely related to apes, right? And you know, I think this is the answer to the whole debate, in my opinion. And that's by the way, it hasn't been published. This is my original finding, if you wish.
Good. Excellent.
And I've debated it with many secular and Muslim scholars. Nobody objects to this, right? So it's very, very conclusive. It's very compelling.
Mm.
Okay, interestingly, if we dive deeper into the embryology, Allah mentions He creates us in stages, and also He mentions the earth again, but He mentions the clot of blood multiple times, obviously, and the water. But what is striking, I find, is that and these elements are interrelated. Okay, so these, you know, one couldn't work without the other. You know, what would be without water? Obviously, continuously we need to hydrate, but also the origins of life, as I mentioned, with the archaeobacteria, also in the embryo, you know, during the embryological development, it's essentially a watery liquid. Our blood is essentially a watery liquid. Okay, so we constantly we constantly need the minerals from the earth. We need a mineral supply through our food, right? And the embryology is obviously in stages, and these are the stages. Okay, the nutfa, the alaq, and the marda. And here you can see the leech-like the leech-like substance, and you can see the gum-like, tube-like substance, which are actual, you know, stages in embryological development. And if you compare a real leech to the human embryo, the early embryo, or if you compare a tube-like gum to another stage of the embryo, you see the similarities. So I don't want to go too deep into the embryology because there are many detailed treatises and videos about this. Interestingly, Allah mentions that in the wombs, Allah keeps us in 3 veils of darkness, 3 layers of darkness, 3 veils. And these 3 veils represent, and it's always like, and it's striking to me that in geology, we have the depths of the mountains, the continental shift, the mountains moving. We have in astronomy, the expansion of the universe, always this precision, you know, the 7 interior layers of the earth, 7 atmospheric layers, the relation between the age of the earth to the age of the universe. We have all these numerology, and it's always precise. Why is it always exactly precise? 3 layers of darkness, current scientific paradigm. And this is from histological studies. You need microscopes for this to establish this. You need telescopes, you need submarines, you need echolots, you need current, you know, scientific instruments to measure these phenomena. Okay, and also the way Allah mentions how we evolve from backbone into the ribs, and that's a clear, you know, chronology how we are from a dafiqa, from a drop emitted, and this is, you know, and that's where I find we can derive a whole curriculum for Islamic sex education as an alternative, early Islamic sex education to prevent the indoctrination in primary schools, in secular schools, with the, you know, LGBTQ agenda. If we weaponize our children with this knowledge, Allah mentions things like ejaculation. Allah mentions the chronology of embryology. From this, we can derive a curriculum for our children, all right, with Quranic vocabulary. And I think the cultural, you know, taboo of sex education, that I think in the West we need to shed that, to be quite honest. But even this LGBTQ agenda is reaching our countries as well now. So we need to confront that. And this is the best way to confront it, okay? Allah mentions the pairs. So that is essentially what we need to indoctrinate our children, because human beings are indoctrinated easily, and Allah indoctrinates us with His Quran. So this is our nature. We are indoctrinated. So what do we indoctrinate ourselves with? If we use this kind of science, Quranic science, That's the best way of learning, of increasing our yaqeen at the same time as increasing our scientific knowledge. What's interesting is that in this ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Surah Al-Najm that He created the pairs, male and female, from a seed when it's lodged. I mean, nutfa is a generic term you can say for, but it is very conclusively referring to sperm here, all right? Either the sperm cell or the sperm substance that comes out during the insemination. So when the genders are determined through it, right? What does Allah mean? And we know now that it is the sperm that actually determines the gender, that male and female are encoded in the sperm and not in the ovum, all right? So the X and Y chromosome differentiation. So there are sperms with XX and there are sperms with XY. There are male and female sperms that inseminate the ovum. And they determine whether the embryo will become male or female. Mainly in 99.9% of cases, because there are naturally born hermaphrodites as well. It's worth mentioning, all right? But those are mutations, okay? Accidents of nature, room for mutation. But interestingly enough, you know, it wasn't known. It wasn't known that the sperm determines the sex until modern genetics was invented. So that's very interesting. Some scholars say that this ayat refers to genetic fingerprinting because, you know, the tips of our fingers were used for fingerprinting, identification in criminology, and now DNA fingerprinting is used. But yeah, why not? Because Allah can, you know, can recreate us like the very tips of our fingers. So the fingerprint is just as individual and unique to us as the DNA. Interesting. To mention the hadith as well, where Prophet ﷺ said that we will be recreated from the tailbone. I think this is food for thought because some scientific theories say that this never decays, it's always preserved, and the DNA is preserved in that piece. And when you are doing genetic studies in fossils, like, you know, even human fossils of Neanderthals or Homo erectus, you use this part of the body. How very precise, you know, the Quran and the Hadith are. Okay, beware of time. It's not been quite an hour yet, so we have a few more minutes left. If you don't mind, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala mentions that somehow the forelock is deceitful or full of lies. It can be full of lies, and that Allah will drag us by it if we do not desist. So somehow that is interrelated, that part of the body, that forehead. And I want to remind us of the fact that apes are mentioned as well as despised and rejected. So interestingly enough, if you look at the prefrontal cortex, we know, and that doesn't exist in most animals, and it doesn't exist, in fact, in no animals, and in apes, it's only rudimentary there. So this prefrontal cortex enables us to have far more higher thinking and associated with these 9 values listed, but specifically also the ability to act or imagine, and the ability to lie, obviously, connected with this part of the brain. Prefrontal cortex, part of the neocortex. Neocortex only existing in apes and humans, all right? If you look at the evolution of what they call the evolution of humans, you will see that most hominins do not actually possess that prefrontal cortex, right? Even Homo erectus, Homo neanderthals do not possess a big part of the prefrontal cortex. That is, and all these apes, gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees do not possess the prefrontal cortex. Isn't that striking? The lying sinful forelobe. And here you can see it, that the fossils that have been found in past strata, layers of the earth, their prefrontal cortex is much smaller, proportionally even. Sometimes it's non-existent, actually. So the capacity to imagine and lie, enshrined in the prefrontal cortex. Why did I quote this? Oh yes, I wanted to refer to this brother and what he's doing, Brother Bini Mad. I recommend everyone to watch his videos on YouTube. He's done something extraordinary. He's derived numerology of the Quran with the verses that I've mentioned, right? I mean, this is also new to me because I was actually Googling this a week or so ago. The fact that the numbers of the ayat match up with the human chromosome pairs. We have 23 chromosome pairs. The 23rd is the sexual chromosome, which determines, the gender. And if you derive the numerology from it, you will see the symmetry in the ayat. You will see words match. You will see numbers match in the numbers of ayat. And you will see a harmonic. And I believe if someone who's more talented than me, much more talented than me in mathematics, studies the Quran's numerology when it comes to cosmology, when it comes to, and I've mentioned some of the numerical matches between the Surah Al-Hadith and the number 19 and the number of elements, the periodic table of elements and the number of the surahs in the Quran. But there is a whole numerology hidden behind the Quran and these scientific ayat, which is striking, which is fascinating. And these ayat are the ones that I was referring to. And you can see how harmonically they are structured when it comes to their symmetry, when it comes to the numerology of it all. Okay? This is no coincidence. This is who can write such a epic work of precision and harmony and beauty and poetry and morality. It can only be revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty. So this is to me a clear proof, and the case becomes more and more compelling as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He will reveal to us His signs in the distant regions, fil afaq and anfusum, in ourselves, until it becomes clear to us that this is the truth, is Quran. So this is part of the whole narrative. And I won't dig deep into the numerology because that's for another day. And partly I don't understand myself properly. And the speed of light, by the way, may I remind you, is encoded in the Quran as well. And there's no end to the numerology that this brother Bini Maad from Kuwait has outlined in his videos on YouTube. He has a channel, and I recommend you to subscribe to it. So to conclude, there are connections also between the moon's phases and obviously the menstruational cycles, the pregnancy and to the weaning, the divorce, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala derives laws and festivals from them, like the festival of Eid, like the Iddah period and the period of mourning, the poor mourning, the period of abstinence, the period of fasting after telling a lie, the period of when the soul arrives in the body after insemination, and obviously, there is a whole book of menses in the Hadith, which I recommend everyone to study for, the etiquettes of marriage and behavior between men and women. And obviously the treatment of those who are subjected to us, in a sense that we as men have to protect our sisters and our wives and our daughters, and also our parents and children, and even the treatment of plants, animals is encoded in the Hadith. And I wanted to refer to a Hadith that was posted on in our WhatsApp group recently, where Prophet ﷺ said that the world is beautiful and verdant, And verily God, the Exalted, has made you his stewards in it. And he sees how you acquit yourselves. So, Allah subhanahu, in that respect, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the mizan, the balance of nature, okay? That he's established the balance of justice, al-mizan, and that in the Surah Ar-Rahman, that we shall not transgress the balance, and that we should establish weight with justice and fall not short in the balance. And that Allah, if we see that in conjunction with the Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 30, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions clearly that to the angels, that he wants to create a vice regent on earth. And that is obviously the angels are wary of past dominating creatures. Maybe some scholars say this might be referring to blood-shedding predators, gigantic predators like dinosaurs, who were previous creations of Allah. And but it's not clear. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obviously has more knowledge than all his creation. And as we are vice regents of Allah on earth, and if we study the Surah Rahman, Allah mentions all that he has granted us with, and the precision of the celestial bodies and the plants and the ecosystem essentially, right? And he mentions there that it is up to us to uphold the balance of nature and not to destroy it, because it is within our capacity to destroy it, right? But it is also within our capacity to preserve it. So striking that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the ecosystem here. So is this the balance of justice among mankind, economical balance, or is it ecological balance? I think it's both, but specifically here, potentially ecological balance, because Allah is mentioning the ecosystem here, okay? And he's also mentioning the two seas, and the tides essentially, and the barrier, the osmotic barrier between sweet and salt water. And it has recently been discovered that is potentially the cleanest and most efficient energy system in the world. So we can harness the osmotic barrier between sweet and salt water to generate electricity. Gas prices are rising, carbon emissions, are soaring. If we could harness natural energy, we know that one of the original forms of generating electricity were, dams, right? But those have proven to be ecologically very destructive. Also, solar panels can be very expensive to produce, and they're leading to a depletion of minerals, as well as the batteries in the cars with lithium. So we need more green energy and natural energy. This could be one of them, as well as fusion energy potentially. And bitcoins, as Jonathan mentioned, they need a lot of energy, and there's obviously there in Norway they have good systems to generate this clean energy. So I think it's one of our duties to contribute to that process of renewal, of making our life on planet Earth more sustainable, inshallah. So which of the favors of Allah will we deny? Because if we see the Ummah as a building, what upholds the justice are the 5 pillars, and obviously they are rooted in a fundament of assurance, conviction, and certainty, which is yaqeen, whose basis is the soil, the fundament, and the basis, the soil that should not erode, and that soil consists of aqal, ilm, and hikmah, right? Perception, knowledge, wisdom, with communication and patience, leads to a reconstruction of this building, which has probably crumbled in parts. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation for today. Thank you very much for listening. Jazakumullah khair, and we can open the round for questions if you like. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Sharik. That was absolutely tremendous. I mean, what a wealth of knowledge you presented to us. Bravo. And, with such precision and such professionalism, you wrote up your slides. it's just so, I mean, I hope we will, I mean, everybody can actually listen to it again and stop and start. And I think because to really absorb it, we need to listen to it again in its depth. And no, really tremendous effort. Thank you. What was this, the YouTube channel you suggested we should just subscribe to? How do you spell it?
Binimad is the brother's name.
Bini, how do you spell
Binimad? Binimad. I recommend everyone to study the numerology of the Quran.
MAD, Mother AD, or
Yes.
North
Yes.
AD?
Yes. B Bravo, I Indigo, N November, I Indigo, M Mother, A for Apple, D for,
Oh,
I don't
and
know the alphabet.
you wanted to send us again, you wanted to show us again the evolution of humanity, that slide.
Okay, so I wouldn't call it evolution because I mentioned clearly that we are separate creations, but the point in time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to create, oh, I'm not sharing my screen at the moment, right? Let me just share my screen again.
Because that was a bit fast.
So that was, I mean, that is essentially the, I would call it the chronology of creation is probably the best way to call it, okay? So can you see my screen? No, you, oh, hang on.
I can see you.
PowerPoint is not responding. Okay, 1 second, please. It will come back to life in a second.
Yeah. Okay, when you have it.
Can you see it now?
It's beginning, it's moving, it's getting there.
So
timetable.
Prophet ﷺ describes in a hadith how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates the clay on Saturday, and he creates the mountains on Sunday, and he creates the loathsome, I think the loathsome things, the loathsome, makruh,
Tuesday,
on Monday.
Yeah.
And then he creates the trees on Tuesday, and then he creates light on Wednesday. So light after trees or after life, because I see the trees al-shajara khulud as the tree of creation. So he creates some living beings before light. And how can that be? And as we know now, at the bottom of the ocean, there are organisms that survive without sunlight. But then, hang on, why is this slide moving? But then on Friday afternoon, Friday is extended in this slide. Friday is extended, and that's where essentially all the animals proliferate. Okay, all the animals, they're created here on Thursday.
Thursday, and then the human beings you said on Friday, I remember
Friday
that.
afternoon after Asr prayer, between Asr and Maghrib, so towards the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's when Adam alayhi salam was created.
That's meant to be the time when Allah also hears prayers more. This is what people say. Pray at that time during the week.
Yeah, so exactly. Yes, that's the most valuable time of the day, of the week, in fact. And if you see, this is also where the bottleneck of extinction took place, where Noah's Ark possibly gave birth to Homo sapiens. So my theory is that Homo erectus potentially was Adam, and that Homo sapiens is Nuh alayhi salam's tribe. That's a theory I have, but it could be wrong. That's not.
Was this the slide mentioned, or was it another one? I can't remember now. Was it not a light one? The chronology of life, did you say you also had? I thought it had a light background. The one I
No, that was this hadith that I was referring to.
No, but when I mentioned, can you show that slide again? Was it that one you just showed, or was it?
It was this one, I think, unless you were referring to another one. But I think you were referring to this one, because this is the one. I had it twice.
I see. I see. Yeah, no, absolutely riveting. Well, I think, why don't we just open the floor to questions? Jonathan, do you have a question?
My question was, this has to sit in the context of the creation of Earth as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we go into the astronomy session, you will see the recording, the age of the Earth in relation to the age of the universe is also mentioned, and it's in the recordings of the previous sessions, if that's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah, I mean, just if you look at all life, I always saw life started with an amoeba.
You said with a bacteria, right? You said it started with a bacteria.
So today's paradigm is that the first kind of living organism were extremophile bacteria, archaeobacteria, which are a whole kingdom, by the way. So there are different kingdoms, viruses, bacteria, fungi, animals, and biologists count us as animals, unfortunately, but archaea. And archaea are most likely the original form of life that can, because they could feed on in the conditions in the original Earth over 1 billion years ago, when there was no visible sunlight penetrating the surface of the Earth. And when the conditions were harsh, in a sense, that you only had, you know, sulfuric gases.
Since that living organism, there was a long period before humans. Yeah.
Exactly. So we only came into being. If you look at Homo sapiens, the oldest fossils are 150 to 200,000 years old.
Yeah. So why do you think we took such a long time to be created?
Well, because we did not evolve from animals. We are just so very different. If you see this, the structure of the skull, if you see, you know, all the characteristics that I've mentioned in one of those slides, I think to me the decisive difference is the amount of energy that our nerves consume compared to the muscles or the rest of the body, which is essentially upside down to animals, right? So our nerves consume 1/3 of energy, whilst the rest of the body, which weighs up to 100 times more, consumes only 2/3 of our energy. You know, you could be sitting there and working hard, you will burn more energy than someone walking all day. That's a big
Muscles
difference.
consume how much did you say?
1/3 of our energy is consumed by our brain and the nerves.
Work hard, I think.
So brain.
In most people.
So I know.
In people who use their brains, sorry.
So muscles consume how much energy did you say?
Sorry?
Muscles consume how much energy?
Well, I mean, the rest of the body, which includes the digestive tract, the muscles, metabolism as such, 2/3.
Okay.
So between 1/4 and 1/3, but you know, in most people, the brain consumes most of your energy of any organ.
No, I didn't have the same. But what about the animals? How is it there in the animals?
It's essentially, the brain doesn't. The brain's energy consumption is proportional to its weight, which is just.
What about the nerves for the animals? They have less?
Their nerves aren't as acute as ours. That's why we have these fine motorical skills. And we also have much more nerves per muscle group than animals do. We have much finer movement. Right?
That's why you have damage, because you have.
That's why we have finesse in our moves. Apes, they are very strong. Weight by weight, they're, I think, 4 times stronger than us. It's been measured. So chimpanzee can knock you out.
Oh yeah, of course.
Can knock you out.
And so basically, you're saying, I mean, is it not so that we came from the same strand and then went into different branches, type of thing? Could that be?
Well, I mean, the evolution of humans is debatable, and strictly speaking, it's not something that I support. I support the creation of Adam out of clay separately from animals, okay, but from the same substance, essentially, from clay, from carbon. We are a carbon-based life form, and you know, there's a big difference in opinion among the scholars. Big difference. Yes. And where there's a big difference, there's always, you can choose whom you accept, right?
But those verses in the Quran that you showed us that said we are created from water.
Yeah. Well, there are many verses in the Quran that state our creation, and there's water, there's clay, there's earth, there's blood like clot, there's in stages. Allah mentions, but he mentions that he creates us out of that creation as a separate creation. So different scholars derive have different opinions on that. Some scholars say there was an earthly body, and that was essentially evolved from apes, and Allah invoked Adam's soul into it. Then there's the other model that we were created entirely separately from scratch, from clay. Allah can do that, obviously, create us separately from the same substance. We have the same code, the DNA. We have, we were created from clay, from the earth, from mud, from water. We consume the same kind of food, etc., separately. The thing where I propose something new is that apes and swine evolved from us.
Yeah.
Which is because it's in the Quran. Because it's in the Quran.
Yeah.
No other reason. And yes, then it matches with scientific paradigm, because the organs and the DNA, where we have 95% DNA in common with a cow, it's 99% with an ape.
You're not proposing evolution. You're proposing devolution.
Devolution. Now that kills any kind of skepticism, because it's in the Quran and because it's scientifically so sound, right?
So why? Okay, so you think it's a one-off event?
It's not only. I don't think it's a one-off event, because Allah mentioned it several times in the Quran.
No. What I meant was these are one-off events. They're not. They're at a point in time where they were done, as opposed to one Adam from whom we descend. Yeah. But apes and pigs also descend from him. But at one point of time, and then they haven't changed.
That's the question. I mean, there are 4 verses that mention that. There are 4 verses, so there could be gibbons, gorillas, orangutans, chimpanzees, and those are the existing branches of apes today.
Or do we have the creation as a devolution at a point of time that then goes over time into evolution?
Well, I think it is confirmed with the Quran that animals have evolved. Allah made them evolve, because that's how he creates, and he mentions that
in stages, basically.
Yeah, and he spread them. He is an evolver. It's one of his names.
Evolver, yeah.
Someone who changes.
Yeah.
That's in an ayat.
Which you showed us.
So I believe in human evolution, though.
Yeah, so what is the role?
Sorry.
What is the role of evolution then in our?
We see, we don't. Jonathan is new to the debate. Basically, there's evolution versus creation, and in Islam, we don't believe in evolution. We don't believe in the fact that we descend from apes. It's the missing link was never found.
No. There's a subtlety here. You can have at a point of time a creation, but from that point of time of that creation, you can still have evolution.
Sure, we are evolving in stages, as maybe what the Quran was saying, but generally we don't believe in Darwin, who said we are descended from apes.
No, I understand that, but what he's proposing is that at a point of time there was a point of creation,
and we are evolving from there onwards.
And all of these things that were created are evolving along their own lines.
Yeah. So I mean, these ayat have many implications, and the history and the fossil record and the anthropology and the scientific findings, they're always evolving, but they're always changing. But we know that there's a very closely related cousin of ours, the Neanderthals, right? The Neanderthals are very closely related to us, and we even swap DNA with them. That's the current scientific paradigm. Whether you believe it or not, that's another question, but that's what science currently says.
Did we evolve? Did we actually evolve from?
They are our cousins. Yeah. So when they are cousins, we didn't evolve from them. They are, right? They're another branch. But
Yep.
but where did we evolve from? So that's the question which is open. Did we evolve from Homo erectus? Because Allah refers to us as Noah's tribe. Don't forget, he mentions that. You whom we bore through the floating ark, right?
Mm.
So we are descended through a bottleneck. There were many people before, then there were very few after the flood. And that is reflected in the genetic record of the mitochondrial DNA. That's why I mentioned the mitochondria as the endosymbiosis theory, as the breathing apparatus of the cell, the small archaeobacteria that were ingested by the original cell. Those are the mitochondria. They have their own DNA. So we have DNA in our cell nucleus, and we have DNA in the mitochondrion. Outside our nucleus, outside our own DNA, we have mitochondrial DNA in the, which is inherited through the maternal lineage. And we use that mitochondrial DNA to determine the maternal lineage, and it points to a small group of females, right, who were on the ark, is the Islamic thinking. So if we're born through the ark, obviously there were humans before the ark, right?
Oh.
So my theory is that Adam was Homo erectus.
Mm.
And there was an evolution because there was a big diversity of human beings before the flood. We know that from DNA, our genetic variety is very small. We are only 150,000 years apart from each other. So, and before that, there were a million years. So they had much more genetic variety. And then only a small amount of people were left after the flood from whom we descend. And that's genetically proven. The out of Africa Eve hypothesis, also called the Noah's Ark hypothesis in science, essentially, right? So they're confirming that. Scientists are confirming that. We evolved from a small group of people.
Mm. Amazing.
That's amazing. That's to me that is
There is,
amazing.
I do believe in evolution.
I believe
but not in
As
relation,
commonly
but not in
understood.
relation to creation.
we don't descend from apes. This descend from us. Humans were created separately from animals. So in that sense, humans, apes, and pigs are separate creations.
That's my point. Yeah.
Yes, and apes and pigs are devolved forms.
Yes, good one.
That's
Very
my
good.
answer to the creationist evolutionist debate.
Yeah.
So there's a wall between animals and sentient beings, humans and apes. There are also other sentient beings,
Makes
which are
sense.
whales and dolphins, who are capable of higher thinking.
Do you think, yeah, and I'd love to schedule a show on that. I noted it down. Sound really nice little teaser there.
Let me give you a snapshot of what they can do.
Mm.
Let me give you a snapshot of what whales and dolphins can do.
Okay.
This is, I mean, it's almost mad, but it's, their eyes are on the side of their heads.
Mhm.
Some whales' eyes are on the front, so they have some have overlapping vision like us, so stereoscopic vision, but most whales' eyes are on the side of the body, of the head, and as well as dolphins' eyes. So they see around their head, like many animals do. We only see the front, but many animals see around their heads.
Amazing.
If they close one eye, one side of their brain can sleep. They close the other eye and open the other side sleeps. So they sleep intermittently with different sides of their brains. They're always alert. Two dolphins can move next to each other and essentially be awake all the time.
Amazing.
That's incredible.
They do that. Dolphins in a school of 400, 500 beings, they're all twirling and talking. Sometimes they're singing hymns together. Sometimes they're talking to each other and they're understanding each other. They can see through each other's bodies because of the sonar. They see into the body. They know if someone's pregnant. They know if someone's angry, if his heart's beating fast or not.
Wow.
They can map the ocean. They have a memory of the map of the ocean. Whales are known to have hit songs that go for hundreds of miles and circle around the earth. Their hit songs go around the earth For millions of years, they've been going around the earth. They're hit songs.
Well, you have
they have culture, they have fashion.
Amazing.
wow, no, we have to do a whole session on that.
Just
They have language.
one last classic humorous question, but a question my daughter asked me a long time ago. How do you answer the question, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Obviously the egg, but the reason for that is that the ovum was the original form of replication. So unicellular organisms, they do mitosis. They just like our organs, the cell splits and then there are two. Bacteria do that, right?
Mhm.
But then when it comes to sexual reproduction, it's called meiosis. And that for that you need sexual organs. You need the mixture of the genome between mother and father. That's where the egg comes in. That's why you need ovum and sperm.
So you have, but you said what came first was the egg rather than the chicken.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the original form of creation. It originally. How do you explain it though? How does the egg come about? Sorry.
Without the chicken.
Indeed.
So that's the question. When did meiosis become? When did mitosis become meiosis? That's the actual question.
Okay.
Because unicellular organisms, like bacteria, they split in two and then they are two. Then they split in four. That's what happens after fertilization. Or the early embryo is one cell, then it becomes 2, 4, 8, 16. And then the inside cells, they differentiate from the outside cells because of the difference of oxygen. When did the egg come about? When did the egg come about? When insemination and fertilization came about. When you needed sexual reproduction. So somewhere between when multicellular organisms came about that reproduced sexually. And that was very early in the evolution, maybe 1 billion years ago.
Amazing. So my daughter's answer to the question, she was very young. She thought about it and then she said, the egg must have come from an alien.
From an alien?
That's what she said, yeah.
Yeah, from outer space, come from Allah. Very interesting. Very interesting conclusion. Yeah, she's true. She's right, actually.
Amazing.
Yeah, very bright little girl. MashaAllah. My daughter also asked similar question. My son is more into science. My daughter is more into arts.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Any other questions, dear friends? Any other questions?
Someone
Can I
raised
get
their
a question,
arm.
Kristiane?
Yes, Indra. Please. Bismillah.
You know,
I can't see you. But
you mentioned, you quote from the Quran that one day the people of the Israel against the law of God that go to the fishing on Saturday, and then Allah punished them become apes. I mean, this the physical situation from the human become apes only on that generation, and then until die they no more reproduction as a apes in the society like in Africa. What do
So
you think?
this changing to apes is mentioned several times, not only in connection with the Bani Israel who broke the rules of the Sabbath. It's also mentioned separately from that. So my theory is that it happened at separate occasions multiple times, but it's not specifically to the Bani Israel only. And yes, they remained a new creation. They then became a new creation, which is apes.
Yeah, because
this is how Allah says apes came about.
Yeah, because this ayah is inspired me about from the story when I was a child, the planet of the apes. Maybe in the beginning they are human like us, the son of Adam, but because they are against law of God, they run away from us because the physical situation is changing from the human become apes. I don't know.
Planet of the Apes is interesting sci-fi. It says that the apes learn that they evolve into humans, that they become, no, not into humans, but they become intelligent like humans.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what Planet of the Apes says. So maybe in 1 million years' time, apes will evolve back into intelligent beings. but not exactly like yours. But that's just sci-fi. That's just fantasy. I'm talking about what Allah says in the Quran, and Allah says clearly that He changed humans into apes. That's not only mentioned once. That's mentioned 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
And swine, by the way.
Mm.
I think Ahmed has a question.
Ahmed,
Mahmood?
Yeah, okay. I
Salaam
wanted to clarify, okay, one thing. Okay. Perhaps there is evolution within other animals throughout centuries and generations, but I just didn't want to correct you on one misinformation. Okay. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God did not specifically say in the Quran that okay, there's been instances of how humans they've actually turned into the pigs or swine or apes. This is when you mentioned about Bani Israel and a few other occasions, that was because that was they punished them by making those humans by making them look like those animals because of their disobedience and transgression. Okay. That's a punishment. That doesn't signify that oh, that's a de-evolution or something. I really need a source. Uh, you can't just speak things out of your mind without any authentic narration. So where does this where does this belief came from that when God punished the Israelite tribes for their transgression on for fishing on Friday, that when he turned them into apes, that was the beginning of the monkey species or whatever? Is there
Monkeys are separate from apes, by the way.
okay.
Yeah, monkeys are different animals. Monkeys are not apes. Monkeys have tails. And apes are just really different. They have a different degree of cerebration. They have a different kind of brain. And they are able to do many things that monkeys cannot. Apes are. But what you refer to with the Bani Israel, that's, it's several ayat in the Quran mention the fact that humans were changed into apes and swine. And Allah says clearly that He changed them and not the people. So what you get, the narration that you get, that you're referring to is in the Bible. It's from the Bible.
is it mentioned there as well, are you saying?
So the narration that Bani Israel were made to look like apes or pigs, that seems to me biblical. It's not, I don't think that's from the Hadith or any other narration, or that they were punished for even fishing on Friday. That's not Hadith. That's not Islamic narration. That's not.
Could there be different interpretations of this fact? Could maybe, that some people think they're made to look like it, like apes?
I mean, apart from that, it's not only in conjunction with the Bani Israel. It's mentioned in the Quran multiple times, totally irrespective of the Bani Israel. Humans, aforetime for transgressing, were clearly mutated into apes, despised and rejected.
This was in the past, yeah. And are you the only proponent of this theory?
Okay,
you're very right to do so. You're a scientist. You can
not the only proponent of the theory of difficult. There are a few scholars who support evolution of animals amongst each other, like I do, that animals change because Allah changes them over time. The fact, I don't think anyone has been quite as bold as to say what I just said.
Yeah. It's a really interesting thought. And then you said that one of your professors in the German university where you studied
Yes.
Acknowledged that this is actually an interesting theory, and he didn't just refute it.
Okay, no, that was actually, it happened twice, that this kind of, it's happened multiple times. By the way, I put up a slide where there was a scientific publication saying that some hominins went back to tree life. Right? Some humans who were upright walking changed into tree living organisms. That is a scientific theory. But also Professor Gutmann of the Senckenberg Institute questions the vector of evolution, the direction of evolution in the time scale. And the person you were referring to now most recently was here in London, Chris Stringer, I referred to him, Chris Stringer. He's an anthropologist, a human biologist. And I presented to him this theory that, you know, rather than apes, we having come from apes, apes are a devoluted form of humans, you know, and he said that this is not beyond possible, you know, that's not out of this world, this theory, because it is a possibility. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
So what I find interesting about theory, sorry, you speak.
What did you meant by saying, okay, that like, how do you, what's your interpretation of the ayah when Allah turned their faces into apes and pigs? Are you saying that and that he totally transformed them into a different creation? Is that what you're trying to pinpoint?
Yeah, and it's not only the Bani Israel, it's other.
Honestly, I made no mention from the Bible. I was just talking about the giving text from the Islamic sources.
Yeah, but fishing on Friday and being punished for that is biblical.
No, it is in the Quran, in the tafsir.
Oh, tafsir, right? Okay. So tafsir is interpretation from a human being.
Look, we've covered this point. We know now.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes, okay.
What's fascinating to me listening to this is the idea that evolution can go backwards and forward. It can go both ways. And
yeah, that's something
that's very interesting. There's no law of a unidirection. It can be bidirectional.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as it's not dominated. It's not a dominating scientific paradigm, but it is theoretically possible, and scientists are becoming more and more open to this idea. Okay.
Well, if you have evolution, by definition, you must have devolution.
Of course, if you have evolution, you have devolution. But
interesting.
What is a clear cut statement in the Quran is that we are a separate creation. I want to make that clear. I want to make clear that
I have one question. Yes, as you said, we are separate creation, and we are descendants. Cousins of the Neanderthals.
That's what science says.
Yes. And who are our common ancestors between the Neanderthals and us?
Homo erectus.
Homo erectus. Okay.
That's what science says.
Adam.
That's what science says. And what Quran says is that we're descended from those who floated on the ark, from a small band of people who survived the ark. All of us today. And that is supported by science, this genetic bottleneck. Okay. But science, for example, would say that the Neanderthals are also came after that bottleneck, or that they were not that they came from this bottleneck, but they were still existent after that bottleneck. So that's a bit of a contradiction to what the Islamic paradigm would be. But you know, I speculated after reading a lot about this that the Neanderthals might be the Gog and Magog.
Okay.
That are still hidden in some cave system, and that they will swarm swiftly from every hill as a sign of judgment, as a sign of the day of judgment. It will come back, essentially. Whatever that means in the spiritual world.
Yeah.
But I mean, coming back to Ahmed's point, I do not want to leave that ignored. I don't think that we should stringently follow interpretations of the tafsirs that were written thousands of years ago, when we are trying to come to a consensus in the present day and age, because those scholars did not know everything that we know today. They knew Quran and Hadith, but there are many, many new findings that came into being that are accepted by the mainstream scholars, you know, that were not part of the original tafsir that was written 1,000 years ago, or, you know,
few hundred years ago. No, of course.
Even whoever wrote the tafsir is an ongoing process, just like translation is an ongoing process.
Varies on.
Right? As long as we have the original text that doesn't mutate, and the predominant Sahih Hadith. We have them as well. As long as we have those,
Exactly.
you can interpret them.
There's a good, I don't, have you come across the study Quran, which is
Yeah, I have downloaded it. You've mentioned that in the past. It's quite elaborate. Yes,
you've downloaded it. Is it online?
as an ebook on Kindle.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, all right, must check into
Okay,
that.
I did have a different question.
Yes, please.
Regarding evolution. When you mentioned about the mitochondria of that there was a separate DNA within us, like where's your like background, like proof of how you can actually trace this back to during the time of the people who were in the Ark of Noah, or Noah alayhi salam, and also how would you know that the people like the disbelievers, the kuffar who are with who are on earth at the time with Nuh alayhi salam before the flood, I mean those like disbelievers, they were completely wiped away from the flood. So how do you know that their DNA was from a different what do you call it, ape class or something?
Not
You
ape.
mentioned.
No, not ape class. No, human class. So it's true that the mitochondria have a separate DNA from us. And that's one of the reasons why scientists conclude from that they must have been ingested into the early cell, okay? So basically because you only inherit it from the mother, and because it has a separate DNA, and you can trace that DNA. So in DNA, there's a method of tracing genealogy and degree of relatedness. So all our mitochondrial DNA has not evolved apart more than 150 to 200,000 years. That's one of the reasons, and that coincides with the fossil record of Homo sapiens. So that's why scientists conclude that we must descend from a small band of females that lived 150 to 200,000 years ago. I'm not saying that's the absolute truth, but that's the current scientific paradigm, okay? So all other lineages went extinct.
I mean, obviously we most likely we don't have any of the remains of the people of Qawmi Lut, the kuffar at the time. I mean, they were totally wiped out from the.
Lut came after Nuh.
I mean, I'm sorry, Noah. Sorry, Noah.
Yeah, Nuh. Okay. Yeah. So the other lineages are gone. That's what Allah says in the Quran. He refers to mankind as the people of Nuh. He refers to us as the people of Adam, but also as the people of Nuh.
Okay.
Yeah. So all others went extinct, and I'm saying that is in line with science, because there's this theory, this out of Africa Eve hypothesis, which has been renamed into the Noah's Ark hypothesis, that we descend from a small group of Homo sapiens, or we descend from a small group of hominins, and those who are left over are called Homo sapiens, essentially, our race. Yeah.
But how can you have? I'm saying, how can you have this theory that any the like and that the people at the time of Noah, before the flood, where's the evidence for that theory that they might have been from a different Homo class or something?
Well, there's fossil and DNA evidence. There's fossil evidence that there were hominins before that looked very different. I outlined some of the their skull structure. So the foreheads were smaller, and it is said that Adam alayhi salam had far less capacity to commit sin. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to the forehead as a lying, sinful forelock, right? So from that, I'm deriving that the capacity to sin is in our capacity to have higher imaginary thinking, and that's located in the forehead. And if you look at the ancestors of Homo sapiens, if you look at Homo heidelbergensis, even the Dinosaurians, if you look at whose skull hasn't been found, but Homo flores or Homo Neanderthals, or if you look at Homo erectus specifically, their forehead is essentially non-existent, right?
No.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, I'm not saying that's 100% evidence, but it's a narrative. Okay, it's a narrative, I would call it.
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, it coincides in a way where this is how Allah made creation happen, and Allah orders us to study how He made creation happen in one of the ayat that I referred to. So it is one of the responsibilities on human beings to study and ponder not only the heavens, but also the earth and the creations, which are obviously, you know, plants and animals. So ponder on that. That's part of the pondering process. It's not never set in stone. It's always scientific theories that evolve and change over time. And we can see that, and in my opinion, that's what I said in the beginning, the more we study them, the more we see that they're in line with what the Quran says. And that makes our belief stronger. And the numerology of the Quran, we can derive a whole curriculum from that to encourage children to, you know, learn science, etc. So that's essentially my proposal, that we use these scientific signs not only for debate with atheists, but also for increasing our iman and for introducing scientific learning and encouraging children to learn science. And I was also proposing Quranic sex education to avoid secular sex education, which is now being pushed into the schools early on, with the narrative that, oh, you are free to choose your gender, or you're free to choose whom you like. Whereas if we fortify children with Quranic learning before that happens, I think we are safe from that. Because very often what they do, they show nudity to children and they shock them, and then they tell them, look, these are the human beings without clothes on. Obviously, this is a boy and a girl, but you can choose who you want to be. And you can choose who you want to like. So children, when they see that, they're shocked and they're confused. And I think that the Quran gives us a weapon to fortify and strengthen the children against this kind of shock, you know, and they're doing it earlier and earlier. So if we can encourage our children to learn the Quran and become Hafiz at 3, 4, 5 years of age, why can't we also teach them the meaning and the, obviously, you know, the scientific implications, as well as the verses that I've mentioned? Okay, that's my take on it. So, Kristiane, what do you say? Shall we conclude with a dua, or
I would
question?
Yeah, unless we have any more salient questions, because now it's already Isha time here.
Yeah.
Victoria, any other points? Any other? Let me just quickly check the chat.
I just wanted to ask something.
Yes, please.
And Martin also read something. Yeah, okay, very quickly.
Actually, my daughter is going to study biology at Oxford. She's going soon.
Mashallah.
And me and her always debating the science of chronology, evolvement of man. She believes in the theory of Darwin.
Yeah.
So what shall I tell her now?
What I said.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is actually great. This is exactly why I'm deriving this kind of narrative. This is exactly why I'm deriving this. Muslims are moving away from Islam because they're being told there's random evolution, survival of the fittest, and then mutation into new species. And human being is at the end of that, we became about as a result of that. Now,
yeah.
And that is how we secularize. This is how scientists can, you know, if their faith is not strong and you don't have this cohesion with the Quran, that's how you can move away from faith.
Yeah, this is the problem I'm having with her at the moment, because she's pursuing science and she's refusing to accept exactly what you have told us.
SubhanAllah. So it's even more important that maybe you make her watch this presentation and then, you know, have a dialogue with her about that. Because in my opinion, and I am a graduate of neurobiologist, and I've done of neurobiology, and I've done evolutionary biology, genetics, neurophysiology, comparative anatomy, ecology. I've done all these disciplines, and I keep reading current scientific discoveries as well, about current scientific discoveries, and I've derived this kind of curriculum exactly for that purpose, right? And look at the numerology of the Quran. Look at all the other scientific signs. That should firmly should give her a reason to firmly hold on to the Quran. So this is exactly it. The creationist evolutionist debate. People are studying science, they're moving away because they think, oh, we can explain the evolution of human beings from cosmic dust. Yeah, but who created that cosmic dust, right? But also the difference between animals and humans, the high degree, I've listed them, the highest degree of cerebration, the sweat glands, you know, the high energy consumption of the nerves versus the rest of the body. It's not present in any other animal, providing by biologists, they call us, they put us into the animal kingdom. So I'm saying any other animal, but we are obviously not part of the animal kingdom from the Islamic point of view. Because you see, we don't want to be like the Christians who just say, oh, this is all wrong. No, we want to deliver clear arguments, and we want to derive these arguments from the Quran and the Hadith. And I believe I've tried to do that. And adding on top of that, the numerology of the Quran is very, very compelling as well for those who want to dive deeper. So
one day you must speak to her. We must debate with her because she wants to go.
Let her watch this, and definitely do let her watch this. And if she has any questions, sure, Sharik, will be happy to answer them. Numerology would be amazing if we could cover that, or if you know anybody who can, because you just what you showed us, Sharik, is amazing. I think you know enough to talk to the uninitiated in the subject one day.
The numerology of the Quran is spread across astronomy, geology, and biology.
Yeah,
and it's so fascinating. It's so amazing. And another thing to cover would be the scientific contributions of Muslims throughout history.
Definitely, we'll do that.
Comparative theology, and you mentioned signs of the last day. It would require a lot of preparation from my side because I'm not an expert in that, right? And I clearly like to say that I think there are much better people than me to cover that.
We'll find. And just one question from Marjolaine was, did she understand it correctly that apes were not in existence before the time of the Israelites, or was that?
I don't know why this ayat is always associated with the Israelites. There is one ayat where Allah mentions the Israelites, Bani Israel, but there are many other ayat where Allah does not mention the Bani Israel. And he mentioned that Allah converted humans for their sinning and transgressing into apes. Apes and swine.
So the apes did exist before the time of the Israelites?
Potentially, yes. Potentially, yes.
Yes. Okay, fine. Because
yes, but there is, Allah can do what he wants, right? So obviously, possible.
But apes didn't just come about through devolution.
Well.
Or could they have? Allahu Alam.
They could have just come about as a devolved form of humans, separate from monkeys. So I don't believe that apes evolved from monkeys.
No.
I don't believe humans evolved from monkeys or apes. But what I do believe is what Allah says, and that is that apes and swine evolved from humans.
Yeah. Brilliant.
It's rebellious, it's new, novel, and it's conclusive, and nobody has objected to that.
I think we should. You triggered us and inspired us to further our studies, to just simply look deeper into it. Maybe, who knows, in 10 years' time, this will be the new normal that everybody will agree.
Even if I'm wrong about this, the scientific signs are still there.
Absolutely.
There's a whole curriculum you can derive from it to encourage children to learn sciences. Because we see what Maryam has told us. That is one of the reasons why Muslims are moving away from science, and scientists are moving away from Islam and religion in general. In the past, they were in harmony.
Yes.
And I believe they can still be in harmony.
100%. Scientists use.
But we have to ask the right questions and have the right kind of narrative and thinking. If we are stuck in 1,000-year-old tafsirs, we will not, then we will deviate further, and we will get weaker and weaker, like we are, because we are stuck in 1,000-year-old tafsirs.
Yeah, no, exactly. We must use our minds now to keep searching, keep interpreting, and shining new light with our new knowledge. Of course, we have.
Science are not in the tafsir.
No, and science is not a dead subject.
But there are many scholars that support the scientific science. Even the Saudis support them. Even the Sufis support them.
Well, of course, but science has always been one of the fortes of Muslims. So it's not a.
So if you're stuck in 1,000-year-old tafsir, you're not going to make progress. You're going to get weaker as an ummah. You're going to get this. You're going to leave your deen.
No. In fact, this is the opposite. We must revive the sciences in harmony, Islam, with deen. We must revive Muslim scientists. Actually, people like you must, be promoted and should lead. Simple as that. And this is exactly what is missing in the Muslim ummah.
Why do Kristiane? That goes hand in hand with the whole. It goes hand in hand with the whole morality. Because you will find that those who are stuck in 1,000-year-old tafsirs are also the ones that are suppressing women. They're also the ones that are doing this. They're also the ones who are doing that. They're also the ones who are doing this. They're also the ones who are doing that.
Yes,
they're also exactly the ones who are holding us back in all respects.
Holding us back in every respect. No, I'm with you. I understand you, and it's very important to keep moving and keep using our brain, but really, and at the same time imbuing the essence of the teachings. Not to force Allah, with Allah.
Alhamdulillah, Allah guides, and that is the main thing. You see, they should see, those who think that we are deviating from the two essence of the deen should see that we are still upholding the values of the deen and practicing the 5 pillars.
In fact, we're doing the opposite. We're the opposite. We're putting the deen into the context of our time and age, where we are moving into a digital paradigm, etc., etc. So, this is, it's in fact very important. So it's the opposite of what, we need to revive the sciences in our times with Allah and as a service to Allah, etc. So all good. No, thank you infinitely for your brilliant book.
Thank you for the platform and for giving us the chance to come together. May Allah
we shall have you back not too long. I really wish you thumbs up from Jonathan. I wish you really that you unite with your wife, inshallah, very soon.
Thank you for this.
Travel to Sri Lanka. Let's pray for that. Let's include this in our dua, that Allah will bring all the spouses together, will bring harmony in the marriages, will bring spouses to the singletons, and bless you, Sharik, bless everybody here in our new Muslim forum, and all their families and friends. And please, Sharik, kindly finish the dua for us. And
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك محمد وعلى محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. Thank you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for bringing us together and for guiding us and making us Muslims. Ya Allah, we're infinitely thankful to you. You're the creator, the sustainer. You are the one who has brought about life and will sustain it. And you're the one who on the last day will raise us again, inshallah. Ya Allah, please make this life easy for us and help us to pass the tests which you place in front of us, and may we not be a hurdle for the unbelievers. And Ya Allah, make us better Muslims. Ya Allah, help us to learn and improve. Help us to help others and to fulfill our duties towards you, Ya Allah, and make us successful in this life and the hereafter, and bring us together with our spouses. And as Sister Kristiane has said, make those who are singletons achieve their the other half of their deen by bringing them together with their spouses, inshallah. And Ya Allah, make this ummah strong again. Ya Allah, make us a
Yes.
dominating factor on planet Earth, contributing to the progress of mankind and the betterment of mankind and to the true essence of Islam. And Ya Allah, may we on the last day be among the righteous, inshallah, and dwell in paradise in the company of those nearest to you, Allah. Inshallah, Ameen. Bismillah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, abdika wa rasulika, mu'minina wa mu'minati wa muslimina wa muslimati. Rabbana a'tina fid dunya hasanatan wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina adhaban nar wa fitna al-masih.
Barakallahu feek. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
See you again soon, inshallah.
See you next week, inshallah. We'll be in touch.
Brilliant. Thank you.